Friends and colleagues, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bold by Choice podcast. And this week, we are exploring one of our award winners. And in the spirit of this year's Bold by Choice Summit, one of the awards that truly captured our hearts and minds was the award that we have named Stewards of Possibility. And we love that phrase because it says something incredibly different than an achievement award or anything about top performance. And we really unpack what we mean by being a steward. A steward is someone who cares very deeply for something that's much bigger than themselves, much bigger than their team, and even sometimes their own organization. It's a group that protects possibility, nurtures innovation, and helps to create opportunities that may not fully reveal their impact for years to come. So these are folks who are in it for the long haul. And this award recognizes organizations that are breaking barriers, that are fostering that innovation, and are passionately pursuing excellence for students, for their families, and for the entire community. And when we sat back and reflected and really thought about organizations that embody the spirit, they live it and they breathe it every single day, I think unanimously, the Colorado Charter School Institute immediately stood out. CSI has helped to redefine what authorizing truly looks like. It's not just compliance. And yes, we have that responsibility for oversight, but it can also be deeply rooted in relationships and strong trust and innovation and just the willingness to create spaces where schools can really meet the needs of the students who enter them every single day. And at the very core of that work is our colleague and friend, Terry Croy Lewis. Terry, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and have this conversation. So thank you for the invitation.
Well, Terry, I'm one of your super fans. And I like to tell people I'm just a charter school dad. But you started off as a charter school mom. Take us through your story and tell us what this journey's been and how did you be so crazy to try a charter school?
Yes, I am a charter school mom. Way back when, in 1996, if you will, when I had moved back to Colorado, and I was trying to find a school for my children actually. And I'd come from Washington, D.C. I was outside of Washington, living in Montgomery County, and my oldest had just finished his second grade year when we moved out here. And I really found that I wanted to be engaged as a parent, and I had some concerns as a parent. And when we moved from a very top-notch school district to Colorado at another top-notch school district, and I started asking questions, I realized the parent's voice was not valued in any way. In fact, it was go back home and you worry about what you need to worry about, and we'll educate your child. So I think it was the lack of voice. It was trying to understand the K-12 education from a parent's perspective, and realizing way back then there were no state assessments, there were no state standards. So how does a child progress through the grades to prepare them for past high school? And I think it was this combination of trying to understand K-12 and wanting my voice heard in some way that me and some other friends came together and said, what if we started a charter school? And they were brand new to Colorado. They had only passed charter school law in 1993. So we came together in November, submitted a charter application in January, and opened our school in August.
Wow. What a timeline.
I'm smiling at that story because people underestimate moms all the time. And that is just like, that story shows the power of moms and why you better not ever underestimate them, because what they will do and can do and do is just simply amazing.
Yes, I agree completely. And I will tell you that when we first approached the school district with submitting an application, They were not supportive. They did not think it was a great idea. And they said, girls go home and try again another time. And I said, well, this is the time. And we will submit an application. And when we did our enrollment for the school, before we had a conditional approval, we had people lining up the night before at 10 p.m. to stay outside the library, sleep outside the library, have blankets and bring each other coffee and hot chocolate so they could have a place in line when we opened our doors at 8 o'clock at the library to enroll students. And it was powerful.
That's what they call grassroots in motion.
Absolutely.
But previous episodes we've done on the Bold by Choice podcast talked about the history of chartering. And one of the things I like to say is chartering is the change engine for education. And that it shifted power from institutions to students, to families, to moms. You just gave a testimony of how true that is, right? The institution said, go home. And you're like, no, you didn't have much where to turn. And all of a sudden chartering gave you a vehicle and an option and a choice. And what we call people voting with their feet.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I am a true believer and have been since I became a parent, that I understand my child. I understand how my child learns. I can obviously turn to experts to hone my skills in terms of education and really trying to diagnose what is the best fit for my child. But at the end of the day, I know my child very well. And I want to make sure that he or she is in a school that they can flourish. That's a really good fit for them. And there are so many different school models, and all my children learn differently. So I want to find that great fit. And when you do, it changes their lives. And I want that for every parent. So that's one of my missions, is that every parent can really find a school, a choice for their child.
That's right. So I'm interested, you really unpacked your personal values. It seems like you share those values with members in your community for them to line up the night before to be ready at the library to register and enroll their student at the school. And walk us through your experience then opening this school and leading the school up to the decision to then transition to become a member of the authorizing community.
Great question. It was a learning. I was fairly young at the time when I took this on with other parents and other community members. And I was a board founder and board member and the board chair. And my first leadership experience was to learn how to lead a group of volunteers. And I was fortunate enough that I had people around me that were very candid with me on what I did right and what I did wrong. And trust me, I did plenty wrong. And so
haven't we all?
Those lessons have stayed with me.
We call that bold by choice.
Yes.
So I did have so much to learn. I believed in our school model. I believed in pulling in people that had different expertise and relying on a team. And I believed that we could create a school that was going to be perfect for our students, the students that chose to go there. If this was a mission-driven school, this was a mission that was going to be a good fit for those children. And we did accomplish that. And that school still exists today. And it is thriving. It's almost 30 years. It's been a long time. But I would say, how did I end up getting pulled into this charter world? That was not my intention to turn to K-12. I was trained as an academic to be in higher ed. And when I was starting the school, the first school, I was working on my dissertation, which is not in education. And after I finished my dissertation, I did go and work in higher ed and do what I was trained to do. And so I was really pleased to do that. I worked at the University of Colorado at Denver, and I worked at the University of Denver teaching what I had, been prepared to do. It was only getting pulled back in from the Colorado League of Charter Schools and other groups that say, could you do some governance training? Can you support another school? Can you help this school either with a charter application or just with their governance on a part-time basis? And then eventually I had an offer to do full-time work working for an organization starting charter schools across the country in high needs areas where they had little capacity. And that just called to my social activism 100%. How could I do that and really make a difference in communities, like the difference that we had made in our community?
So, Terry, take us back to being a charter school board member of a founding board and the board chair. I know that pays really well. For all the audience, right? Being a charter school board member doesn't pay a penny.
Right.
Maybe reimburse some expenses if you're lucky, but it's a big sacrifice, but it's a big service, right? What was that like, especially in 1996?
Oh, yeah, that's such a great question. I was just actually talking about this earlier to someone. Back then, there was no startup funds. There was no anything that you did, anything you produced was out of pocket. So if you needed to, you have to print off your charter applications, 15 copies to the school board, you paid for that. You paid for everything, all marketing. And so I was fortunate enough that I had the ability to do that. I think it's because I was a student for so long. I was used to not having an income um, and a mom. And so I could continue my volunteerism. And that's what I did. And we, back then, it's such a different world. We didn't receive our first per pupil revenue payment until July, and we opened in August. And so all that pre work, that planning work, is really out of pocket and it's just truly volunteerism. And there are many people and many organizations across this country that are doing incredible volunteer work. And we rely heavily as communities on volunteers. And the charter space for sure has relied heavily on volunteers.
At the Institute, we do what we call Fired Up Friday. And today was one about being all in. You certainly were all in.
100%.
And you tried to get away, and the Colorado League brought you back?
Yeah, it was the league. It was doing work that I felt like was so gratifying. I love teaching at the university level, but changing communities, I really felt was my calling, if you will, and to be given an opportunity where I could impact a community. So individuals are important, obviously, but the whole community is impacted by a high quality charter school. And that is at the center of the community. And so I got pulled back in, and the more I did, the more I wanted to do, and ultimately went on to work with a group of people to found another school in a very high needs area, high poverty area, very diverse area. And we got the school up and going. And well, we got it approved and we could not find someone to lead the school. So the board said to me, why don't you lead the school? And I said, oh, no, 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 no. I'm a board member. I'm a founder. I'm not that kind of a leader. And they're like, no, 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 just do it for a little while because you know the school better than anyone. And I said, all right, for a little bit, I'll do it. And 8 years later, I was still doing it and loving it.
I love how the on ramps and off ramps, right? As we go through our careers, it's like the universe kind of just guides us along one step at a time.
All right. So Terry, I'm going to tease you and all of our authorizer friends across the country. So you help start a school, you run a school, you're doing association stuff, right? How did you end up going to be the authorizer, right? The regulator, the school police? That's quite a switch.
Oh, absolutely. Similar to the, I don't want to do that. Be a school leader. I don't want to be an authorizer. And I was very clear on that because I would say over and over, I'm a charter school person through and through. We look for ways around things, not for, being compliant. If it doesn't work, we need to find out why the bureaucracy is there and how do we change it? How do we change the situation so it's better for students? So I did not see myself as an authorizer. And when board members of CSI came to me and said, we are looking for a new ED, we think you would be a really good fit, I disagreed with them and said, no, I don't think I would be. Thank you for the offer. I appreciate that your kind sentiments, but I will not do it. And so it was at the last day, as this happens to so many people, the very last day that the posting was open, I decided, what if I did do this? What would it do to CSI? Because CSI was near and dear to my heart. I had been a CSI school leader, and I knew many of the school leaders at CSI, and I knew what their needs were. And I said, what would that do if we had a school leader in that role?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I decided to apply.
And
you still have a smile.
I know.
A smile and a culture. I mean, you all have become known as an authorizing group that really thinks about authorizing and your role and your relationships with your schools and the school leaders, and even what's possible in your communities in very unique and different ways. How did you all create that culture among the team?
Change management is real in terms of like, how are we going to move everyone in that direction? And when I went through the interview process, the board had me interview with school leaders, staff, board, and the school leaders were great. She's one of our own. Staff was like, what is coming out of her mouth? She keeps using this word support. We are not a support organization. We are a compliance organization. And I said, oh, no, we need to provide support. And had a hard time getting their head around that. I would tell you that not everyone in that room thought that I might be the right person for the job. So then when I came on board and the board did decide to hire me, we sat down and I started to explain what I meant by that. And I explained that we can still be compliant. We still need to make sure our schools are not violating any kind of state statute or federal statute. We have to hold them accountable. But that doesn't mean we can't support them either. It's not mutually exclusive. But it took some time for them to understand what that meant and how that played out with the work that we do. And so it didn't happen overnight, but we got there.
So Terry, you love being Daniel going into the lion's den.
Absolutely. Yes.
You said to Vashaunta and me that you love going in rooms where there's disdain for you and what you do at the Colorado Institute. Just take us inside the personality. Why does that? Why do you find that such a challenge, and how do you deal with it?
I am invigorated by that experience because I, like so many people, am curious about how other people think and why they've come to the conclusions that they have. And so if I can be in a room with people that think very differently than I do or had a different experience, I want to know what that experience was, why they believe what they believe. And many times, not always, people believe something and there's misinformation. So perhaps I can provide a different set of facts and figures that might change their mind. Maybe they've had a personal experience that I want to hear about, and I want to talk about my personal experience. And so I think it's in the connecting with individuals, and I find it quite gratifying to connect with people that think and experience life differently than I do. And then hopefully we can reach a place where at least understanding, acceptance, move along the continuum that one, we're not in a situation where I'm going to dislike you because you don't like what I stand for, and you're not going to dislike me because you don't like what I stand for.
And I think that's like one of the markers or indicators of really strong leadership. We were talking, the other day, like this is at the end of the day, a people business. And it's about how we communicate with each other, how we take that moment to understand each other, how we have to walk around and even remind ourselves, every individual human is way more nuanced than we would ever imagine, right? Like whatever our perspective is limiting. And that relates to children, families, team members. So I love that you pulled that out. I think that's part of what we see with you and your team and how you navigate the landscape in Colorado with your work. One of the things I loved hearing you say last week was that you kind of see your meetings with your team as like a think tank. Take us into that. What does that feel like, look like, sound like to be an authorizing body that really practices this kind of think tank?
Yeah, and thank you. I brought that on early into my tenure of how can we be a think tank for charters, authorizing, education. We want to be broader than this narrow focus on just authorizing. We want to be people that are exploring different ways of looking at things, different, be provocative, read and learn from others. And so we can grow and understand that the complexity of the work that we do. And I think we need time to do some thinking, and we need to be open again to being in a room with people that have a different opinion. I want to be in a room with staff that disagree with me. I want them to say, you know, I don't see it that way. I had two meetings, one yesterday and one this morning. One where the person on staff was, I had a very different experience with something that happened last week I need to tell you about.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be something you agree with. And I'm like, I don't have to agree with it. I want to hear what you have to say and how you experience that. And then when I was in a meeting this morning, it was the same thing. It was like, push back. Don't just say this
Mm-hmm.
works. Tell me where it doesn't work. Tell me what I'm not thinking about. And we only get better if we're in rooms like that. And so I think most of our staff really has embraced that. If you look at the amount of task force committees, conferences, papers or essays that people or white papers that they're writing, or all the different ways our entire staff gets engaged, it's because they're putting themselves in those same rooms where it's like, let's learn. And I'm excited about that because then I learn from them because I can't be in all those rooms.
Right.
Terry, I hear humility in that, which is you're trying to have people find your blind spot, your weakness, thing you haven't thought through. And so you want them to bring different thinking. I sometimes say if everybody's thinking the same thing, somebody's not thinking.
Right.
But there's a false choice that I think authorizers get positioned with quite often. And I want to go right at it and have you address it. This idea of accountability and support, right? Some authorizers, their identity is we are accountability. And they're very proud of it and they think it's really important. You came in with a support identity. But to me, it really gets to an issue of trust, right? So like, if schools don't trust you, they're going to hide problems.
Right.
If schools do trust you, they're going to talk to you and you can probably proactively find solutions. But how do you think about that? How do you articulate? What would you say to your authorizer colleagues across the country that are like, geez, we really shouldn't do support because we're accountability?
True. And some authorizers, if they do support, they have a completely separate kind of arm of the organization that's doing support and one's doing compliance, and they don't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I had to teach our staff is no, I'm not going to separate it out. You are both the compliance and your support at the same time. And that was hard for folks to figure that out, and something we still talk about. But I always use the analogy of being a principal coaching a teacher. And how do I go into that classroom and say, we need to work on your objectives. We need to work on your lesson planning. We need to work on your classroom management. We need to work on whatever that is. And here's some ideas on how you can do that. And then at the end of the year, that person did not accomplish what I'd like them to accomplish. They were not a competent teacher and they were not asked back. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't see it as this separation of that you can only be one or the other. I think Our schools understand that we have compliance responsibilities, and they're not bothered by that. But as Jim said, trust is the critical piece in any relationship. You have to trust that I want what's best for you, and I want what's best, most importantly, for every one of your students in the school. And I want to help where I can. And ultimately, there may not be enough support to keep the school going. And it may not be the right thing. So we've closed more schools in my tenure by far. I think we're up to 10. So in 10 years. So I'm not afraid to close a school. It's challenging. It's challenging for that community, going back to the community. But how do you do it in a compassionate and professional, respectful way? That's the key.
And what Jim talks about this, right? The humility piece. One of the things along this lines that I love that you talk to us about is that this year alone, I believe you visited about 70, maybe a little bit more schools. And so that like speaks to the action. You're taking bold action that marry very well with your bold values and philosophies. How does physically experiencing schools in your portfolio help you continue to lead in the area and also with your team?
Yeah, I think you have to be in schools. You have to, if you're going to build relationships with the people in the school and the community that they're serving, you have to be in the school. And and like some things that we talked about last week was very much most of those meetings and most of those visits are low stakes. I am doing a tour, the Western Slope of all our schools. I'm coming in and we're just going to have a conversation. We're going to have a cup of coffee. And it's great if you want to take me to visit classrooms, but that's not what's so important. I want to talk to the school leader. I want to talk to board members or maybe other folks that are in a leadership role. What are your challenges? What are your successes? And we learn so much by just having a cup of coffee with someone. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we learn is, you know what? You're doing some pretty interesting things that I would have never known.
That's right.
I learned so much from you. And do you mind if I take that practice and share it with our other schools? Because I never thought of that as a school leader. What a brilliant idea. Mm-hmm. And as challenges, hey, maybe we can provide some support or I can connect you with someone that could help you in that. But again, that's for you to decide. Mm-hmm. So just have a cup of coffee with someone. It's a wonderful conversation.
So, Terry, share with the podcast nation, how many schools have you visited already this year?
I think Vashaunta got it right. I think it was just about 70 so far this year. I'm not done with the year. I'm going to a school this afternoon.
That is so powerful.
The reason I want to double down on that is one way to view authorizing is you're in a desk looking at data and documents. Another way is you're out in the field. And the reality is it's some of both. But I just think that's a great testimony because they say one of the things great leaders do is they communicate. They communicate formally, they communicate informally. They're curious, right? They care. And your stories exemplify those characteristics. And what's so important oftentimes is you end up in a high stakes situation. To be able to have these conversations, to get to know each other, to explore those questions, what can you give, what can you get when there is no high stakes? It's those credits in the bank that when it does come to high stakes, you've got the ability to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's those relationships. And I think, one of our survey questions, annual survey questions for school leaders is, how well do you think CSI staff know your school? How well does the board know your school? Because having been on the other side of the contract is what I always say, and I'll always have a school leader's perspective is, do you know my school? Are you making judgments about me, but you don't really know? And I've had that experience as the school leader where the authorizer came in and said all kinds of things. In fact, I remember this vividly, that he talked about all these things that were going on in my school. And I said, that is such stale information. That happened a year and a half ago. Do you want to know where we are now and what we're doing? And let's talk about that. And so it's important for schools, and rightfully so, that we understand their school and we understand what they're doing. We understand the people in it, and we understand what their challenges are. And again, most importantly, their successes.
I think, and we'll move off of this, but I just want to say it this way. I believe fear produces compliance.
Ooh.
Trust produces improvement.
Yeah.
And we want better schools, right? We want excellence for all.
Mm-hmm.
It's built on trust.
Yes, it is.
Get that trust through those opportunities to have coffee with the school leader, walk through the building, and get an understanding of the culture and the climate in that school. I love that the two of you really brought that out beautifully for our listeners. And one of the other things, I love many things about some of the work I've come to learn about from CSI. One of them is you all really seem to embrace what I think we call innovation, but others may call it just making the right decision for the communities and the students who are in them. And what I mean by that is you all have opened some schools, closed some schools. You have a variety of school types and models in your portfolio. And you may have had to have some difficult decisions in order for those things to become true. So I'd love for you to share a couple of examples of maybe schools where you all were like, hey, our community needs this school, but maybe it wasn't popular with some of the team members or board members, or other types of decisions that you all have had to grapple with that have really made you this innovative authorizing body.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the first thing we talk to our school boards or anyone on the board, and also our staff about, is having an openness to all school models and being aware of your biases, conscious and unconscious bias, and then really kind of tackling that. We have had schools come to us, applications that we all that challenged all of us, that challenged us to say, wait a minute, is this possible? And there, some come to mind. I'll talk about the first one is Prospect Academy, which is a school that's serving mostly kids on the spectrum. And it's not a novel idea because there are schools around the country that are doing it. But in Colorado, it was pretty novel. There was not in a school, a public charter school that was doing this. And our special education team struggled. And then the broader special education team throughout the state struggled. The advocacy group struggled. And so we decided to embrace the school, and then we had to do our own advocacy. And one of the things we did was we worked with the special education advocacy statewide. We worked with the statewide directors, and we worked with our own SPED team to talk, and nationally, about how the school could be successful, and to force us to think about what those biases are and think about how to overcome them. And that school is doing great, but not easy. It's not easy, but it's doing great. And there's a lot of schools around the country that have come before them, so we can learn from others. Another school that came to us that I personally, as a mom, had to say, wait a minute, my mom's hat on, I don't know how this is going to work. And that's an outdoor school in the mountains.
Wow.
Well, wait a minute. You're in the mountains and there's bad weather, there's snow, there's blizzards, there's all kinds of weather related things. And then there's wildlife.
That's what I thought about. There's bears.
You got bears. You have mountain lions. What do you mean you're outside all the time? How does this work? So, I definitely had my skepticism going. But at the same time, this is what we do. We embrace, we learn. We said, we're going to talk to the school leader. We're going to learn from the applicant. We're going to go to the community. We're going to talk to the parents. We are going to put that aside and just push into, what does this mean? And again, that's another school, like most school models, do exist somewhere else in the world. Some version of that. We can learn by looking to other schools. And that school has been wildly successful in their first year. And now you wouldn't believe how many communities want another one. It makes sense when you learn what these students are doing and you learn how the families love it and why they do. And guess what? Academically, they're doing really well. So
It's a
you might say,
win-win.
yeah, right.
Well,
You know,
if you want to teach kids perseverance and fortitude, put them in the Rocky Mountains for a year.
yes,
Like right on.
right. And and I should have, remember that I had a son who went to Knowles, which is outdoor education, for a month and lived on a mountain in Wyoming for a month without a cell phone. And he learned more that in that month than he did the whole year before in school. So
That's
you do,
beautiful. I
yeah.
was in this courageous leadership conference this week, and one of the session leaders said, what is required of leaders more today than ever before is the skill and the art of deep listening. And you just highlighted your team's willingness to take the time and be humble enough to put yourself in a deep listening situation where you're hearing multiple perspectives, multiple voices across all kinds of lines of difference and different angles to help you all make the decision that ultimately is best for them. And that was just such a beautiful example. So I really appreciate you providing us with that gift, right? That gift of those stories.
Well, thank you. And please come visit that school next time you're in Colorado.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. I love school visits. I can't wait. I need to do better. I'm not at 70 for this year, so I need to catch up.
So, Terry, at the Bold by Choice Summit, you and your team, including your board at the Colorado Charter School Institute, received the Stewards of Possibility Award. And what so impressed is that this hasn't been a 1-year journey or a 3-year journey. Like, this is a 20+ year journey. And what you've done is you've got a mindset, a culture, an outlook where there'd be 100 reasons why you could say no to an application like that, right? And yet you went overtime to find ways to say yes, to allow it to take root, see if it could grow, how it would work. That is a model for, I think, the future of authorizing.
Yeah.
Because if we want new and different, there isn't going to be the research and the reports and all the evidence. You're betting on people, you're betting on ideas, you're betting on the ability to implement, that parents are going to want it. Like, there's so much into that. So to take the time, but to have the attitude, and I'll say the humility to do that, doesn't happen by accident, right? Like, you guys have your theory of action. You're very clear about it. You write it down in your documents, but could you just talk the audience through kind of your big theories of action and why they're so important to the DNA that you've created?
Yeah. And I think, starting with the DNA, I am a charter person through and through. And I think charters always were intended to do something different. It's a gift. It's a gift to take public education dollars and to offer something that's not in the community right now and to do it differently. Because first of all, education changes and evolving so quickly, and we see it right now, right? It's just on such a fast pace. And the needs for students change, and the needs for communities change. And the K 12 experience is going to be different for everyone. And definitely for a student in 2026 is going to be very different in 2046. And so, how do we always put ourselves in a place of evolution? What is that evolving? What is that thing that we need to learn? And I learn every day from my schools, our schools. I learn they're thinking of things that I never thought of. I'm learning from communities that they know what their community needs. I'm learning in ways it's like, this is a new charter application. This is a new idea. And this is why we think is going to be successful. Well, let's explore that. Let's find ways that you can do that and offer that to your students. And I will never stop being curious and never stop kind of finding different ways. And the ways that maybe worked 30 years ago, well, maybe they're not working now, or at least not for these students at this time. So I don't think we have the research base on all schools. I think that's a crazy expectation because they're doing something innovative. It's something new. So let's help them on this journey to allow students to experience this in a way that when a kid is excited about school, a kid is really engaged in school, anything's possible. And I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it with my own kids. So, and I've seen it with my students. So, well,
Vashaunta, I got to call that out.
Yeah.
She started in 1996 as a mom with a charter. It's 2026. I think that's 3 decades. She is as curious and as learning and giving as ever. It's the John Wooden quote. It's what you learn after you know it all. Like, you're the living embodiment of it, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
you always have the best quotes. And Jim, I'm amazed. I can learn from you. I just need to memorize some of these. But yeah, I mean, I haven't lost that. I think I've never been one who believed that I have all the answers. I think that there is so many incredible people doing great work. And one of the frustrations I do get with people or with our state, if they think that they are so unique. Like, did you look over there at that state and what they're doing? And did you look over there and learn from what they're doing? We need to always be looking broader than just our community, just our statewide perspective. We need to look nationally and throughout the world. What's working, what's not, and let's kind of have that global view. But people do get kind of caught in their narrow mindset, and so we had the first and only charter school that is on a reservation on tribal land in Colorado. And you would not believe how difficult that was to take them through that process and how many people thought that it was the most unique school type of all kinds. Like it was so unique. And I'm like, wait a minute. We have a lot of other states that have reservations, and guess what? They have charter schools on them, and they're really successful. Can we knock on their door and see what they've learned in the process? And with every new model and every new innovative application, we have first looked outside ourselves to see who knows something about this, and let's go learn. Let's go ask SUNY what it's like with a micro school. Let's go ask another authorizer what it's like. Tell us, what can we learn from this? And then we can be much more informed. The other thing we'll do is if it's something that no one in the charter space has any expertise on, we will bring in an expert nationally who has expertise in that model or that population of students, that demographic, and bring them into the application process. What do we need to do? And not only to review the application, but they've done training on our staff. For our staff, they've done training for our board. We worked with a school with dealing with adjudicated youth. You need to understand that system. You need to understand what that means for students that are in the judicial system and what their experience is and what options are, and not just in Colorado, throughout the country. And we don't feel like we have all the expertise, and we would never do that. We would seek it out.
Yeah.
You mentioned the tribes. I have a dream that one day we host a national charter school event with the tribes from around the country because they're involved in running schools. They're involved in housing schools. The Bay Mills community in Michigan is an authorizer of charter schools. There would be such a rich dialogue and cross-fertilization of ideas. So someday we got to make that happen.
I love
Absolutely.
that.
I mean, when we were going through that approval process and we were doing learning, we were learning about the school, we were learning about the tribe, we were learning about their history. And then we were teaching the State Board of Education about that because they had to approve waivers. It was learning throughout. And one of the things early on when we were working with the tribe, and I think I'm pretty open minded, I made the mistake of they asked for a waiver about mandatory reporting. And I was so taken back that they would even ask that question. And they put me in my place pretty quickly. And they said, you don't think we have our own laws to address that?
Yep.
What makes you think
Wow.
that we wouldn't?
Wow.
And good for them.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that.
And
Yeah.
I got educated similarly. Like, we're a sovereign nation.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
So there's, I mean, there's so much to learn. But
Yeah.
Vashaunta, I know you got to take us to the finish line. We could talk all day.
We could. It's so good. My heart's just overflowing. But I love that since the summit, we've been talking a lot around here about the future of education. So, as our kind of wrap up question, what is in store for CSI and Colorado community?
So this next year, as we go into 26, 27, we are bringing on 3 new schools, 3 transfer schools, and then 2 new schools. I think, in as difficult as a path as it is to get to CSI, we will have growth because we want to embrace the innovative. We want the most schools outside the box. And I think we're going to see more than that, more and more of that. We have an application coming to us in in July that's going to look really different than really none of our other schools. And so I do think we'll continue to see very interesting, innovative models that are complicated. I always said we're the authorizer of the complicated, and we'll probably continue to be the authorizer of the complicated.
Well, that's called grounds for research. I think that's your higher ed experience coming back. You're like, we're going to do active research right here.
I think we call that being a steward of possibilities.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. So I am always excited to talk about the great work that our schools are doing in the community. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate you. You are a busy group and you took some time out to spend with Jim and I today. We're incredibly grateful. Jim, any final reflections before we wrap up?
You know, I don't know if a podcast host, you got to hold the guest accountable or if you can be supportive, but let me try being supportive for a minute. I told you all at the beginning, I'm a Terry fan. And I'm going to tell you why, and it's in a deeper why. And at the risk of maybe making Terry blush, she has such a big heart and cares so much about this. And she has for 30 years, right? So you can't fake that. It's genuine. Every role from volunteer to board member to association to authorizer, right? She embraces. And she is so giving. So if you see her at a national conference, she's working with other authorizers. She's sharing ideas. She's giving them resources. She's supporting them. At our Bold by Choice conference, they presented.
Yeah.
Well, who was up front? Terry's team, right?
Yep.
It was just, Janet and Ryan and Jess. And then there's Terry where she pitches in occasionally. But if you watch her, what she's doing is she's growing people, she's growing schools, she's growing future leadership. And Terry, I don't ever want you to hang it up, but what I can see is that you're growing the future. And just your grace, your strength, your gentleness, like it's that paradox that Collins talks about the level 5 leader. They're personally humble, but they've got this professional will. And that's why I teased you at the beginning. I can just only imagine the people that tell you no. They better watch out because you're going to show them how it's done.
That was so kind. And yes, I am blushing and getting a little teary eye. That was very, very, very kind of you to say, and generous in your thoughts and how much you appreciate me, but mostly our team. I do believe strongly that my mission in life, besides creating great schools or creating the conditions for them to be successful, is also really coaching and training leaders. And way back when I went through a renewal process at CSI and I was the head of school and I told the board that I am here to train leaders, they thought I was crazy, but it is. If we don't have leaders, if we don't have people that are inspired to move a community and touch a community in a way and move them in a direction that's going to be beneficial for everyone, it's sad. We need really strong leaders that have a lot of integrity, a lot of humility, and just a deep caring about the people that they're working with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so big on the choice of words. So, Vashaunta, last thing for our audience, she said she's there to develop leaders.
Yeah.
She didn't say principals. She didn't say administrators. She didn't say managers. She said leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a different craft. And it's imperative because what do we need? We need more visionary leadership. We need more can-do leadership. We need more bold by choice leadership because management isn't going to get us the schools our kids deserve. It's going to be leadership. And we want excellence in education for everybody at all levels. And that requires leadership and it requires vision. And I just am so glad that you're on the case, Terry, and we're going to do everything we can to support and be your ally.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it means the world to us. You are truly a supportive organization and as individuals and collectively. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Well, it has been indeed our pleasure to spend time with you here today and with your team in many other instances and events. And we're so proud of you all and the work that you're doing. And mostly, we're excited for what students and families have the opportunity to do every single day in your portfolio. Well, family, thank you all for being with us and listening to the Bold by Choice podcast. We say it every week. If you haven't already, go ahead and commit, hit that subscribe button, stay with us. You don't want to miss a single episode. This season, we're going to continue exploring people and organizations who are choosing to challenge the givens, who are choosing to create opportunities and to build something better for students and communities. Well, friends, we'll see you next week. Same bad time, same bad station.